All right. So everybody, thanks so much for listening. If you're listening to us on one of the podcasting sites, thanks so much. Please like, subscribe, share. If you're listening to us on one of the radio stations we're on, we really appreciate that. And do tell your family and your friends, and honestly, whoever you can get your hands on, to listen to our program, because we do have a lot of great people on, and we're trying to keep, the quality of the interviews and on as far as that goes, and keep some good people on. I just fumbled and stumbled over that, but we will move forward into this interview. Real special guest, somebody that's had an incredible life story, really been through the ringer and really rose above all the challenges she had in Taiwan, she had in America in general, and she's really has a good story out. And I'm going to also read her book right now. It's 99 Fire Hoops. Definitely check it out, Amazon, or her website. It's Allison Hong Merrill.com. And then she does have a Substack too. It's Allison Hong Merrill Substack.com. Allison, thanks so much for coming on here. I look forward to hearing your story in person and also having the audience hear your story in general.
Thank you so much for having me, Rob. Such a great honor.
Right. So, I heard a previous interview you did with another show. It was extremely impressive how you, as I said, you rose above a lot of these incredible issues you dealt with, not just in Taiwan, but also in America, not knowing much English and not knowing anybody, period, at all. Let's talk about this and just start off from the beginning. Tell the audience a little bit about growing up and how your story in general started.
Great. So I was born and raised in Taiwan in a very traditional Chinese culture, family, under this Buddhism and Confucianism upbringing, which brings down to just this principle, this social bond of women and girls were conditioned to abide by 3 obediences, which are obey father, obey husband, and obey sons in widowhood. And that kind of social bond have been observed for thousands of years, but it just did not work for me. I did not see the social justice in it. Why is it that a specific gender in the entire human family need to submit to another gender, right? Yeah. And in our modern day society, how do you speak that to gender fluid people, right? Because we also have people who are non-binary. Then where do they stand in this societal expectation? So as a child growing up in that society, in that kind of culture, I disagree with how I always had to wait silently for permission from a man to tell me when I could speak, when I could act, right? So having a little rebellion in my heart, when I was 15 years old, I decided to go against my father's will, to disobey him.
I'm just going to interrupt you every once in a while, just because I think something's coming out of you that I do want the audience to learn a little bit more of. So you said you developed that rebellion. Just to backtrack, where was that coming from? Because, as you just spoke about, Allison, it was pretty much, given that you were supposed to listen to these men regardless rather how old you were. Excuse me.
Yes. And so I first started that spark of rebellion when I watched my parents fight in our home. Because my mother, being a woman, she was supposed to submit to my father, to do everything my father said and never speak against him, never rebel, but she did. And so they fought all the time. And the fighting they had wasn't just verbally, it was the physical fight where my father, obviously, my dad, he was stronger, he was bigger, so he could beat her up, but she would never just stay on the floor and sob. That wasn't her. She would get up all bloody and, covered in blood and tears, and she would fight back. Like she couldn't beat him up, but she would pick up a piece of furniture and chuck it at him. That's how she fought. And so as a child, that was very horrifying to watch your parents fighting in your home, and that made me feel very insecure and scared. But it also gave me this concept of, well, if somebody bully you, you could fight back. Sure. And even if that bully was a man, it doesn't matter. If it's wrong, it's wrong. You fight back to do it right. Right. And so I learned that from my mother. She fought back, but she never was successful. She would be sent to the hospital, or she would be defeated and she would just leave. My mother lived with a packed suitcase that she was always ready to leave my father. And she would go back to her parents' house and stay there for a period of time. But then she will always come back. She always came back. And so deep down, I feel like maybe when she went back to her parents, maybe her parents, my grandparents, being so traditional, abiding, by living the social bond of the 3 obediences. That's what a woman should do. Just be obedient, obey your husband. And they will send her back to my father and said, that's where you belong. You need to go back to him and be a good wife, be a good woman, and just be quiet and just be silent and just, put your head down and listen to him. And so she will come back. And so during my parents' married life, they were only married for 19 years. She will have this yo-yo, like a yo-yo, that she had this pattern, like the yo-yo. She will leave and she will come back, and she will leave and she will come back. But every time she did that, all I could see as a child was she fought back. She wanted justice, and she wanted to take her fate into her own hands. She wasn't going to let the society or the culture tell her, you shouldn't fight back. You should just be quiet and obey your husband. That's what you do. That wasn't what she did. And so I learned that from her. And so when I was 15 years old, I decided I wanted to do whatever I thought was right for me. And so my father did not want me to be baptized, to be converted to Christianity. But I had found Christian teachings. It was right for me. It was what I was looking for, right? So I was baptized into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And my father was furious that I betrayed. So according to my father, he said I betrayed our ancestors' faith tradition, and that was a sin. And so I was a bad child, right?
Yeah.
But I was baptized. And so when I was 21 years old, I was in college in Taiwan, and I wanted to serve a mission for the church. And in order to do that, I had to drop out of school because the educational system in Taiwan was not set up for people to just leave, to defer their education for a couple years and then return. It wasn't set up for that kind of needs. And so I had to drop out. And so I dropped out of school, and I went home to tell my dad, I dropped out and I'm going to go and serve mission. And that was the breaking point in our relationship. He thought
did he ever fight you or do anything to you violently or?
Yes. So my parents divorced when I was 13 years old. So when I was 13 years old, they divorced, and my father remarried.
Right.
My stepmother was also very abusive, and she would tell my father to beat me for her viewing pleasure because she was bored and she wanted a show. It's almost like the gladiator fighting a beast, that kind of show. She wanted to watch it. So she told my dad to beat me, and she would sit there and watch. Well, I wasn't a fool. I wasn't going to sit there and let my dad beat me up. So I would run out of the house, and so my dad would chase me with the exact same thing that my dad did when he was still married to my mother. They would have this fight in the house, right? Physical fight. And then my mother would run out of the house and he would chase after her with a butcher's knife in his hand and would chase her into the alleyway, because we live in a slum, right? And so we live in this very narrow alley. And she would run into the alleyway, screaming for help, covered in blood and tears, and snot. And the neighbors would rush out to the alleyway and line the alleyway watching, because it was entertaining to them. Nobody would stop my dad, because it was the right thing for men to beat their wives in that culture, right? Because the 3 obediences. And so the women deserve to be punished if they were disobedient to their husband or to their father, right? And so nobody helped my mother. They were watching. This was entertaining to them. And so now that my father was chasing me into the alleyway, exactly the same way he chased my mother, ready to beat her up or ready to hurt her. And he did the same thing to me, except this time he didn't have a butcher's knife in his hand. And so that was the life I lived as a teenager. And so, Rob, to me, the tradition, the culture, whatever I was brought up in did not work for me. I was unhappy. And I did not believe at the time, I did not believe any human being deserved to be that unhappy, right? And I was a teenager. That kind of life brought out the suicidal thoughts in me. And I hope that this is not too dramatic or too graphic to the audience thinking, what? Teenage suicide thought? But it was true in my story, in my experience. When you live that kind of life every day, you were treated as a subhuman, right? As a lower class citizen. And every day you woke up and you knew there would be some form of abuse coming your way, you will start thinking, well, maybe I don't deserve to be alive. Maybe death is better than being alive, right? At least that's what I thought as a teenager. And luckily, I found hope and love in the gospel. And that's why I clung onto that lifeline, because that's where I feel safe. That's where I feel like, well, there's hope and love in the world. And so when I was 21, I wanted to serve a mission to spread the gospel to the people who might have been in my situation when I was younger. And I wanted to take that happiness to those people. My dad was so upset about my decision that he disowned me. He said, well, you want to go serve your white God? Because, Christ to him is a white God. He's not Chinese, and so he's like, you go serve your white God. You don't ever come back. You're not my daughter. You're a disgrace. So I was disowned and I became homeless. I was homeless twice in my lifetime. That was the first time. He kicked me out of the house. It was on Chinese New Year's Eve. And that was the equivalent of Christmas Eve here in the Western culture, where everybody would go home to be with their family and celebrate the holidays. And my father kicked me out of the house on Chinese New Year's Eve, and there was nobody on the street. It was raining that night, and this was in 1994. Yes, 1994, Chinese New Year's Eve. And it was raining, it was cold. I was on empty streets alone, shivering, right? Because it was cold and raining, and I had no money. And so back then there was no cell phones. There were only pay phones on the street. So I went up and down the street looking for forgotten coins in payphone change slots, hoping to find some money.
Yeah.
And so I found like some, the equivalent of pennies. I found pennies. And then I made phone calls and was able to find help from a bishop in the local church. And he said, okay, if you could get on a train and come back to Taipei, the capital city, and that was 3 hours away from my house. He said, if you could do that, you could come to my house and spend the holiday with my family, and we will figure out how we can help you further. And so that's how I got help. And so I went on a service mission in Taiwan. And after my mission, I came to America. I transferred to a school in Texas. And that's how I came to America. And that was in 1995.
So I do want to go deeper into that, but just kind of to backtrack, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this. You had a couple of sisters, and one of them, your stepmom, did she traffic her or sold something to her? Tell us the correct terminology on what happened with her.
Yeah. So I have 2 younger sisters. The youngest one, I call her May. So
are you still in contact with all your sisters or no?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm still in touch with both of my sisters.
And they're still in Taiwan, or they're here, or what?
So both of them are here in America.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So when my father remarried, I was 13, 14, I can't remember. 13, going on 14.
Sure.
My youngest sister, she was born with disabilities. She was born with cerebral palsy, and it was on the pretty severe side of how she could not take care of herself. She had to use a walker to move around, and she had this speech problem. She could not really talk clearly. You couldn't really understand her, Anyway, so at the time she was 7 years old, and she had been sent away. My parents had sent her to live in an institution for disabled girls. And she only came home to spend the weekend. I think it was twice a month. She would come home. The school bus from the institution will bring her home.
This was when the stepmom was there, or your real mom was there?
So my sister was sent away when she was 2 years old. And at the time, my mother was still married to my father.
Okay.
And then my mother and my parents divorced, but my sister, she would still be dropped off at home twice a month. The school has a school bus that will bring her home. And so after my parents divorced and my stepmother had moved into our house to live with us, one day, my little sister, her name, I gave her a name, May, in my book. And so May was dropped off at home for the weekend. And that happened to be a weekend when my father was not home. He was on a business trip. So it was just me and my 2 sisters, Dee and May. So we 3 sisters were home with our stepmother, right? Because my dad was gone. Okay. And so my stepmother, she was drunk. And she came to, we 3 sisters had no dinner. My stepmother would not feed us. She would not let us have food. She would not let us go to the kitchen. And so she had dinner and she was drunk. And she came to us, and we were in the living room watching TV. And she came and she turned off the TV, and she said that she had a friend who was a doctor. And she said she had talked to her friend, this doctor friend, who was waiting to take my sister, May, the disabled sister, to the clinic to harvest her uterus and her ovary, just her organs, right, to sell on the black market. Because my stepmother said, well, you are useless goods anyway. You're a waste of money because, your father, you're costing your father too much to raise you, and you need to contribute to the family finances. And so I've talked to this doctor. He's willing to perform the surgery, and we can sell your organs and make a big profit. And so she was drunk, and now I think back, I don't know if she really meant it, but we were kids. We were horrified.
Yeah.
We were so scared. And then she grabbed my younger sister, and she was going to pull her, you know, take her somewhere. And in my mind, I was thinking she really was going to do it. She really was going to take my sister to the clinic. And so I freaked out. And my other sister, Dee, she freaked out. And then we were trying to help my little sister, trying to protect her. And my younger sister, Dee, started a physical fight with my stepmother. And they were, doing this trying to hurt each other. And eventually my stepmother fractured my sister Dee's skull.
Wow.
And then ran away because I called for help. I went to the phone and I called my father's friend and said, come help us. Our stepmother is trying to hurt, whatever. And I was calling for help, and my stepmother ran away. And so by the time my father's friend came to our house, my stepmother wasn't there, but we were a mess. We were just beat emotionally and physically, and it was just all too much, right? And that's the story I shouldn't say story, that's the reality we live.
Yeah.
But culture, it was okay, it was acceptable because we were girls, we were nothing, right? If we were boys, if we were boys, I'm very sure it will be a very different story. Probably the neighbors will come and help us, or the relatives, or even strangers. If they heard any sounds of abuse, if any boys call for help, they will receive help, but not as girls. Yeah.
Wow. It's really traumatic stuff. And now, just when the stepmother moved away, ran away, rather, I should say, did she come back again after that, or that was the end of it?
Oh, she came back. And remember, I called for help, so my dad's friend came. And when he came, he saw my sister Dee. She was attacked in the head. So she was, on the floor. And so the friend, this uncle, we call him Uncle Leo, he took my sister to the hospital. And then the doctor examined her and treated, tended to her wound, and then wrote down reports for us to use against the abuser, because we were kids being attacked in our own home. Something was wrong, something bad happened to us in the home. And so the doctor wrote down the report and he gave it to us. And he said, if you want to take legal action, you need to give this to your parents. He didn't know the abuser were our stepmother. And he said, you need to give this to your parents. And if they wanted to take legal actions against the abuser or the whoever assaulted your sister, this will be the proof. And so we had that medical report, and gave it to my dad when he returned home from his business trip. And my dad said he wasn't going to do it. He said, I'm going to lose face. And that's all very important to a Chinese man, is you cannot lose face. You need to always look dignified. Always look respectful. And you cannot have this kind of gossip for your neighbors to talk about, right? And that will make him feel very humiliated, and he didn't want it. And so he decided to do nothing. He didn't tell my stepmother that she needed to stop, nothing. No, he didn't do anything. And so the abuse, not the same abuse, but different kinds of abuse continued. And that's why it just wasn't a happy place for me to be. And, I found solace, I found comfort in the church, in the love of the brotherhood, the sisterhood, the fellowship in the church made me feel like that was more like home to me than going back to my house and being treated like that.
Really intense story. I'm grateful you're telling it. I think it's important for people to know, regardless if you were a guy, a girl, I don't think anybody should have been put through that kind of trauma as a kid. We're going to go deeper into this story. I just want to reframe and tell the audience that this is Allison Hong Merrill. The book is 99 Fire Hoops. Again, the website, AllisonHongMerrill.com. And then on Substack, it's AllisonHongMerrill.substack.com. Let's go into the Cameron talk. I know you gave him that name. You went to America, you went to that school in Texas due to him being there. Go a little deeper into that story as we continue on.
Sure. So I met Cameron when I was in college in Taiwan, my freshman year. I met him. At the time, he was serving a mission for the church, and he was assigned to serve in Taipei. And he served his mission for 2 years in Taiwan, so he spoke fluent Chinese. And I met him when I was in college, and then he returned home. He finished his mission, he returned home to Texas. And after he returned home, I went...
Just to interrupt, was there a relationship between you and Cameron during the time he was in Taiwan? Or was it a friendship? What was it?
It was friendship. We were friends. Okay. And so missionaries, serving missions, they had to live by this rule of no romantic relationship during their service. So for 2 years, they were not allowed to have any kind of romantic friendship, romantic relationship. And so when Cameron and I met, he was a missionary, so nothing happened. We were just friends. And then he returned home, right? And once a missionary returns home, then he or she can go on with life, can, get married and start a family, or, just like regular family life. But it was just during that time when they were serving, they're not supposed to have any romantic relationship. And so he returned home. I served my mission, but we stay in touch through snail mail because there was in the early 1990s. And so we were pen pals. And then after my mission, I could not go home because I was disowned, and I could not go back to school because I dropped out of school. And so I wrote to Cameron and I told him about my situation, and he wrote back and he said, "Oh, okay, stay put. Don't go anywhere. Wait for me. I'm coming over to Taiwan to visit you." And so he flew to Taiwan to visit me, and we were engaged. Now, this is the tricky part about this relationship, is we never really knew each other. We never dated. We didn't know each other, but we became engaged. And so we got married first, and then we started to, I'm saying, like, you got married first and you started dating to get to know each other. And then, so after we were engaged in Taiwan, he went back to Texas, and I applied to transfer from the university in Taiwan to the same school that he was attending in Texas. And I was... What
part of Texas was this?
This was in Edinburgh, Texas. So it was a very southern part of Texas.
Near like Mexico, or?
Very close to Mexico, yes.
Oh, okay. I don't know that area, but we'll move on from there. But go ahead.
Yeah, so that's how I came to America. I was on a student visa with a scholarship to go to that school. And 10 days after I arrived in the US, we got married. And like I said, we got married first, and then we started dating to get to know each other. And I discovered, Cameron wasn't really the person that I would marry if I had known, because he has so he was addicted to pornography. And I wasn't happy about that. But when I confronted him, because I discovered, this, and when I confronted him, he was very, very offended. And he said, "Well, guess what? That's what American men do. American men do this." And so
man.
right?
Oh,
And so then, he's like, if you're not okay with it, you're just gonna have to get used to it because we were married for life. And so I thought, oh man, that doesn't sit well with me. But there were also other things. We were just fighting. We were fighting all the time. We were not good friends. And so
okay.
that's the problem. We were
It's
not good.
I just think, and I know you were in kind of a tough situation in Taiwan with your dad and
Mhm.
stepmom and all that insanity going on.
Yeah.
And you were trying to move forward in life and be a good Christian and do your missions and stuff. And I'm very perplexed why this guy pushed this engagement and this marriage extremely fast. But I don't know if you have any, thoughts on why you think he moved that fast on you, or was he looking for like
I,
sexual attention? What was it?
Rob, it's really hard to know because,
Yeah,
like I said, so I'm guessing now
sure.
it has been like 30 years now, and I look back, I can get a little more clear. Hindsight is always 2020.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And so I look back, I can kind of piece together some clues to guess what really was going on at the time. I feel that
Mhm.
Cameron was the kind of person who needed to be in a relationship. When I say relationship, it's like a romantic relationship or a marriage relationship where he could have an upper hand, that he could be the one who makes decisions, right? He could be the one who doesn't have to counsel with his partner, but he would just go ahead and make decision for his partner, and he will be
So,
the boss, and he wears the pants. And
so Allison, you went from one relationship with your dad and your stepmom doing similar stuff to
yes,
another relationship that probably wasn't as bad with the abuse. I mean, maybe it was, you can tell me, but maybe it was not as bad, but it was still, the same wavelength as being similar.
yes, because I feel like Cameron at the time, he was looking for a woman from that culture who had been conditioned to obey.
Control.
Yes, to obey the
Mhm.
husband, to obey the father, to obey, men in general. And he found that in me because I was brought up in that culture. And it was
Right.
perfect for him, right? Because I just can't really imagine if he had married a woman who grew up in the Western culture, who was very independent and understand her value, her worth of her soul. She would not allow that to happen. But a very typical Chinese woman would allow it to happen. Look at my mother. She let it happen, but she fought it and it still happened, right? And so I feel like a woman from that culture will fit perfectly in Cameron's expectation, right? Because he had an expectation of, I am going to be the alpha male. So I guess that's possibly why.
All right.
But
So
it's
just, oh, sorry, Allison. Just going back into the story though. So you get there was the pornography issue. You guys were fighting on and off consistently in general. And then just let's move forward into when you came home to turn the lights on, what happened?
Yes. So 16 months into our marriage, one night I went to a friend's apartment. So at the time, Cameron and I were renting a student apartment in this huge apartment complex. And there
Mm,
were other neighbors. They were all, students who were going to the same university. And that one night, it was in November, it was a week before Thanksgiving. I went to a neighbor's apartment to sort of to seek marriage counsel, marriage advice, because I was really frustrated with how Cameron and I were constantly fighting. We just did not get along. So I went to this friend's apartment for 2 hours. And before I left my own apartment, Cameron was still there. He was doing his homework on the bed, right? And so I left for 2 hours. When I came back to my own apartment, I opened the door because the door was unlocked. I opened the door and it was dark. All the lights were off. So I reach over to the light switch on the wall and I turn it on, and the light did not turn on. And so I flipped the light switch on and off, and the apartment remained dark. And so I thought, what is going on? So I had to feel my way into the apartment, and there was nothing in the apartment. The apartment was empty. Cameron had moved everything out of the apartment, and he had cut off all the utilities, and he had terminated the apartment contract, and he had returned the key, and he had withdrawn all the money from our bank account, and he has served me divorce paper within 2 hours. I thought, okay, I was in denial. I did not believe that was real.
Was your stuff still in the apartment? Or did he take that too?
He took everything except the bed. He left behind the bed, which was very merciful because it was November, a week before Thanksgiving. It was cold, right? And then I thought, this is not my apartment. I must be in the wrong place. So I ran out of the apartment to check again, and I saw the number, the apartment number, nailed to the door, and it was 21, and that was my apartment. There was no mistake. I had been abandoned. He left me, right? And I had no family in Texas. I had no friends, and I did not speak English.
Right.
So suddenly I had a lot of decision I had to make, right? I had to take care of myself, but how would I do that? And so that was the second time I became homeless in my life.
Yeah.
Was that day.
All right, we're back again for people listening. Allison Hong Merrill. The book is 99 Fire Hoops. It's AllisonHongMerrill.com, AllisonHongMerrill.substack.com. I think we left off right, when you became homeless for the second time. And I believe we were going to go into saying what happened next.
Yes. So, Rob, if you can imagine, this was a week before.
I can't imagine much of this stuff because I think half of this stuff is insane that you
mentioned. It is insane. Okay.
But anyways, go ahead.
Yeah. So I have to take a moment and just to say this because it's very important to say. It has been 30 years since I was left alone, abandoned in Texas. And now I can talk about this experience without feeling any hurt. And I feel like I was telling somebody else's story. And I feel like that is the healing power of time. I feel like time can heal. And also there is always that hope of life can get better. Life can get better. You can actually live the life you want to live, right? Just hang on a little bit longer because this will not be your eternal future. This is only momentarily painful, but all this pain, all this heartbreak will build you up, right? And then you'll become stronger coming out of it. And that's where I am right now, where I'm not saying I'm all strong and invincible, but now I can look back and not really feel that hurt and be like, oh, woe is me. No. So going back to that night when I discovered Cameron had moved out, he had left. I had to grow. It's like the saying, you have to grow up overnight. Immediately. You have to become.
Can I just jump in? Did he ever have contact with you after that? I mean, I'm sure he had to because of the divorce, correct?
Yes, the divorce. We saw each other in the courthouse.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But then
did he ever like tell you what happened? Or I mean, obviously we both suspect kind of the same thing of what happened. That it was very much a control thing, maybe he rebelled too much, and he just kind of had enough of the rebelling or found somebody that wasn't rebelling, period. Regardless of what happened, he never said anything about any of that stuff then? No. Okay.
No. Yeah. So, okay. So it was like that saying, I had to grow up overnight. I had to
Yeah.
learn to take care of myself, right? Because now I'm all alone. And this time being homeless was a lot worse than the first time, because now I was in Texas and I had no family, I had this language barrier that I couldn't really communicate with people, or I had this very little, very small English vocabulary, about a 3-year-old's proficiency, even though I was going to college at the time. But studying in college, in sitting in an American classroom and listening to the teacher teaching in English, it was not the same as talking to people on the street asking for direction. It's different, right? And so at the time, in that moment, I realized I had the power of choice. Even though Cameron took everything from me, he took all the physical, material things from me, and I became homeless. I had no money, I had no home, I had no family, I had nothing. But he did not take away my power of choice. I could still make choices for myself. And then in that moment, I realized, in my mind, I always had this dream life. Even from a very early time in my life, I had a dream of a happy family, because my family was not happy. And I wanted to live in a happy family. And so that was my dream. And that dream did not die, even though all the people around me failed and failed and failed that expectations, right? But I still had that dream. And I thought, how am I going to get to that dream life? What is between me and the life I wanted to live? And then I realized it's really simple to get there. It's really simple. It's a straight way to get there. And that is to make one right choice at a time. If I just make one right choice right now, and then after that, I make another right choice, always keeping that goal, that end goal in sight and heading towards the right direction, and every choice I make will take me there, then I will be there. Just be patient, right? And so that's what I did. And so the very first right choice that I made after Cameron left me was to overcome. I chose to be brave. I thought this is the first right choice I could make, is to choose to be brave. So I chose to not worry about people who might laugh at my accent or laugh at my broken English. I was going to choose to be brave and go and talk to people in my broken English asking for help. And so I went to our apartment manager, and with my 3-year-old English vocabulary, I asked her with some sign language or body language, and I asked her to let me stay in that apartment for another week. And I told her, I will get help. I will get help, but let me stay for a week. And she said yes. And when she said yes, I knew at that moment that I could do this. I could make another right choice that would take me closer to the dream life I want to live. It's all that little baby step. And so that's how I got to where I am today. Today, I'm living my dream life. I have a very happy family life. But along the way, I wasn't always on the right path. I made mistakes. I made bad choices too, right? Because I'm a human being and I'm not perfect. And so when I made a mistake, I had to suffer the consequences. But then I realized God is very merciful. He will always let us come back if we want to. And so I can choose to come back, to stay on that right path again, and slowly, but always toward the right direction to get to where I want to be and to live the life that I want to live. And so, I mean, it's not an easy happily ever after, because life is not over yet. And I know that there will always be obstacles and challenges ahead. But that's how I got from that desperate situation to where I am today, where I can look back and I can tell you the story as if it was somebody else's life, because that's how much I have healed from that wound.
Well, it is really powerful, and I'm very grateful that you're doing a lot better now. You seem like you have a good family. I believe you have 3 kids now, and
Yes.
obviously you're married again, and you have everything going right. Hopefully, God willing, we hope everything stays that way. I want to end with this. There's a lot of people struggling. They've been struggling specifically a lot in the past 3 years with all the illness, with all, physical illness, mental illness, housing issues, food insecurity. The list goes on and on. This is not just in this country, but around the world. What would you tell a lot of people? Because you've been through the struggle, whether it was in Taiwan or in this country, where people have used and abused you physically, mentally, and emotionally. Give some people some hope that are struggling right now, that maybe they believe in Christ, maybe they're still trying to find their way back to God in general. So if you could just talk to the viewers and the listeners, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. So I feel like, so let's put aside the spiritual or the religious factor
Okay.
of the situation. And I feel like all human beings, you and I, we all want 2 things in our lives. We all want to love and we all want to be loved. And I think that's the universal desire of everyone, right? And another thing I want to stress is that nobody's life is perfect. All of us will, at some point in life, encounter challenges, big or small, right? We will always face difficult situations that sometimes might break us, break our spirit, break our will, break our dreams. That is just life. And I have learned through my personal experience that it doesn't matter where you are in your life, whether right now you're completely happy, everything seems perfect, or if you feel like you're at the bottom of a hole that you can't climb out of. It doesn't matter where you are in your life. God is aware of where you are, and He is there waiting for you to reach for Him. And where you are right now is only a chapter of the entire book of life, meaning you will not stay here forever because your life goes on. And so if you're hurting right now, if you're in despair, if you're grieving, if life seems hopeless and you feel like you're in darkness forever, I hope that you will understand this is only a chapter in your life, and there are many chapters after this one, and it will get better. It's like a hero's journey, right? And so the hero's journey, it goes up and down, and maybe right now you're at the valley of shadow, right? But then the next chapter, you will rise and you will go up to the summit of a high mountain where God is there, and that's where your joy is. And so don't get discouraged and think that this is where you will stay forever. This is not, because life is fluid. It's not stagnant, right? So just hang on a little bit longer. Keep your hope bright and shining.
Well, I hope people listen to this interview when it goes up and view it, of course, too. I hope people buy the book, because out of all the interviews we've done, your story has been extremely inspirational. Been one of the top stories that we've done as far as somebody that's really been through the ringer in life and really risen above it. Again, Allison Hong Merrill, 99 Fire Hoops, AllisonHongMerrill.com. And again, the Substack is AllisonHongMerrill.substack.com. Last question. When we talk about the book, 99 Fire Hoops, can you talk about the significance of that title before we end?
Yes, of course. So in Chinese, the number 9 is the homophone, or it's the homophone as a long time. And so it's a metaphor for a long time. And so if you put the number 9 and another number 9 together, it becomes 99, right? So 99 means eternity. It's just a metaphor because it sounds like, oh, a long time and a long time, double the long time, that's forever. And so that's what 99 means in the title. And then fire hoops is a metaphor for challenges. So just imagine a circus lion being trained to jump through a fire hoop. And that's like a challenge. That's like an obstacle that is jumped through. And then imagine if you make somebody jump through 99 fire hoops, and that's eternally jumping through. And that's how I felt when I was a child, when I was a teenager. I feel like my life was just a series of endless challenges, one after another, you know, the father, and then the stepmother, and then Cameron, and then all these horrible things that I had to jump through. But now I look back, I know there's an end to it. There's an end. And when we make that one right choice at a time, we are also going through one phase of our life after another that will take us one step at a time to the place where we want to be. And so just be patient with yourself.
Allison Hong Merrill, definitely get the book, 99 Fire Hoops, AllisonHongMerrill.com. And again, AllisonHongMerrill.substack.com. Allison, like I said, I hope we have you on. You really give a lot of inspiration to people listening that are going through tough circumstances throughout their life. And that, again, like I said, you can really rise above it if you put your mind to it, put your critical thinking cap on, and really try to think as best you can. It's going to be tough. Like, as you stated, we all have trials and tribulations through our life and struggles in general. And with that, we just got to figure out how to navigate them, find some good people that can help us navigate them. And hopefully we'll get past them as quick as possible. And God bless you and God bless your family, Allison, as we end this interview.
Thank you so much, Rob.